The MK2 Fragmentation Grenade. Known widely as the Pineapple Grenade, this was the standard hand grenade used by American forces throughout the war. Its segmented iron body was designed to break apart on detonation, sending metal fragments outward in all directions. The design dated back to World War I, and by the time WW2 began, American soldiers were already familiar with it. It had a kill radius of about 5 meters and a casualty radius much wider than that. Simple to use and reliable, it became one of the most recognizable weapons of the entire conflict. The Mills bomb. British forces carried this grenade as their primary option, and it had actually been in service since 1915. Despite its age, it remained highly effective. The Mills bomb worked on a lever and pin system. Once the pin was pulled and the lever released, a delay fuse gave the thrower a few seconds before detonation. Soldiers often held it briefly after pulling the pin to reduce the enemy's chance of throwing it back. It was tough, dependable, and saw service across every major British theater of the war. The Model 24 Stielhandgranate. German soldiers carried this grenade, and its long wooden handle made it immediately distinctive from anything used by Allied forces. That handle was not just for looks, it gave the thrower far greater leverage, allowing the grenade to be thrown much farther than a standard round grenade. The explosive charge sat in a metal head at the top, and a pull cord inside the handle activated the fuse. Allied soldiers called it the potato masher. It was designed more for blast effect than fragmentation, making it particularly effective in trench clearing and confined spaces.
The Model 39 Eihandgranate. While Germany relied heavily on the Stielhandgranate, they also fielded this smaller, egg-shaped grenade alongside it. Its compact size made it easy to carry in large numbers, and soldiers could throw it quickly without the wind-up motion required by the stick grenade. It used a similar pull cord ignition system, but delivered a more straightforward, explosive blast. Toward the later stages of the war, as German production became strained, this simpler design became increasingly common among German infantry units.
The RGD-33. Soviet forces used this grenade extensively in the early years of the war, particularly during the brutal defensive campaigns of 1941 and 1942. It had a more complex design than most other grenades of the period, featuring a fragmentation sleeve that could be added or removed depending on the mission. Without the sleeve, it functioned mainly as a concussion grenade. With it attached, the sleeve broke apart and added lethal shrapnel to the blast. The mechanism required a swinging motion to arm it before throwing, which took some practice to do reliably under combat stress. The F1 grenade, also used by Soviet forces and sometimes nicknamed the limonka, meaning little lemon, due to its shape, this grenade became far more widespread than the RGD-33 as the war progressed. It was simpler to produce, easier to use, and its cast iron body created effective fragmentation. The F1 bore a strong resemblance to the French grenade it was originally based on, and versions of it remained in service long after the war ended. Its straightforward design made it a natural choice as Soviet industry scaled up production during the most intense years of fighting on the Eastern Front. The Type 97 Fragmentation Grenade. Japanese infantry relied on this grenade as their standard option throughout the Pacific campaign. It had an unusual arming method. The soldier had to strike the cap against a hard surface, often their helmet, to start the fuse before throwing. This added an extra step compared to the pin and lever system used by Allied grenades, and under pressure, it occasionally caused hesitation. The Type 97 had a delay of around 4 to 5 seconds and produced a moderate fragmentation effect. Despite its quirks, it was used in enormous numbers across every major Japanese engagement in the Pacific. The Type 99 Grenade. Japan introduced this as a simplified follow-up to the Type 97, intended to be faster to produce and easier to arm in the field. The percussion cap ignition was retained, but the overall construction was streamlined. It was slightly smaller and lighter, which suited the nature of jungle and island warfare, where soldiers moved quickly through dense terrain. Like many Japanese weapons late in the war, production quality varied as resources became scarce, but it remained the primary grenade in Japanese hands through the final campaigns. The number 77 White Phosphorus Grenade. Not every grenade was designed purely to kill with fragmentation or blast. This British grenade was filled with white phosphorus, a chemical compound that ignites on contact with air and burns intensely. It was used primarily to create smoke screens during advances or retreats, but the burning phosphorus itself was also dangerously effective against personnel and could not be extinguished with water. Soldiers treated these grenades with considerable caution. The number 77 saw use across multiple theaters and represented a category of grenade built around effect rather than explosive power alone. The Gammon Grenade. British and Commonwealth paratroopers carried this unusual grenade, which was different from nearly everything else fielded during the war. Rather than a fixed explosive charge, the Gammon Grenade used a cloth bag that the soldier filled with plastic explosive and whatever amount was needed for the situation. A screw-on cap contained the fuse assembly, and the grenade armed itself as it tumbled through the air after being thrown. This made it highly adaptable, effective against light vehicles, fortified positions, or personnel, depending on how much explosive was packed in. Paratroopers valued it precisely because it gave them flexibility when operating far from regular supply lines. The rifle grenade. While not a hand-thrown grenade in the traditional sense, rifle grenades were a core part of grenade warfare across all major armies in WW2. A standard grenade or purpose-built projectile was fitted to a rifle barrel and launched using a blank cartridge, sending it much farther than any soldier could throw by hand. American, British, German, Soviet, and Japanese forces all fielded versions of this concept. It bridged the gap between a hand grenade and a mortar, giving small infantry units a ranged explosive option without needing additional crew-served weapons. On both sides, it was a practical solution to the problem of distance in open terrain. The Incendiary Grenade. Several nations developed grenades specifically intended to start fires rather than cause blast or fragmentation damage. The American M14TH3 used a thermite mixture that burned at extreme temperatures and could melt through metal. These were used to destroy enemy equipment, vehicles, and supply stockpiles rather than to directly engage enemy soldiers. Thermite burns so intensely that it can melt through an engine block or destroy a weapon beyond any possibility of repair. Incendiary grenades were a deliberate and calculated tool, used when the goal was denial and destruction rather than direct combat.